This is what broke me wide open and what really changed the trajectory of my life. I wouldn't be here at this podcast if it wasn't for breathwork.
You're tuned in to the Dr. Kinney Show, and I'm your host, Dr. Erin Kinney, a naturopathic doctor and speaker dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of your body and guiding you back into balance. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Kinney Show. This week, I'm really excited to have Trish Brewer, who is a certified breathwork coach, Reiki Master Teacher, and intuitive guide, joining us on the show today. Trish is a friend and a colleague, and I love referring to her, and I love the way she teaches, and I'm really excited for her to share her wisdom with everyone who's listening today. So thank you so much for being here, Trish. It's great to have you.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So as usual, can I have you start by sharing your personal journey and share with listeners kind of what got you into breathwork?
Yeah, it's exciting. So I actually had a medical emergency that occurred, I think it was 2015 or 2016. And that landed me in the hospital for a week with unresolved, as the Western medicine is kind of unresolved, which had me kind of change the trajectory of what my lifestyle was going. So I incorporated yoga, meditation, Reiki, and brought that into my life, regular journaling. And then 2 years after that, I was in the mountains of Vermont at a yoga meditation festival, so to speak, and breathwork found me up there in Wanderlust in Vermont. And I knew I'd been searching for what modality I wanted to practice. And I was studying Reiki already. But when breathwork found me, it just cracked me wide open. And I knew I equate it to a coming home. That's what it felt like for me.
That's really cool. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit on the show, kind of the different ways that breathwork can be used as a tool in everyday life, and then the way breathwork can really be used for deep healing. Was your experience one more of a deep healing experience when you were there?
Yes, that was a very deep healing. Yeah.
That's really cool. And then, so you came out of that experience, and share a little bit more about how that translated into you doing this work in the world now.
Yeah, sure. So that sent me on a trajectory. I signed up for a lot of breathwork classes that summer. And then by the end of that summer, I was signed up for the first level of healing, breathwork healing class to learn in that training. And then by the second year, I was finishing up the rest of the training module. And those modules were done with David Elliott. And that was being able to bring that to a group setting, right? And along the way, I also finished my Reiki training certification and continued on that path. And that just gave me a lot more things to bring to clients. I kept them very separate in the beginning, with that understanding of let me understand one module before I bring them together, right? And so that's how I kind of worked in groups and keeping my Reiki and breathwork very separate. And now as a practitioner, understanding all of these different modules, I've been able to integrate them a little bit more, all of these modalities. And then I continued to do the work. I learned a little bit more about the science behind the breath. I studied with another teacher, learning more about the everyday breath tools, and the science behind why they work. And that gives me another way to work with clients and helping them understand what they can do in their everyday lifestyle, healthy lifestyles, what they can bring forward every day to help them kind of build their toolkit, so to speak. And then from there, I realized there's a lot of trauma that comes to the surface with the active breathwork healing. And I felt like I needed a little bit more to really be the practitioner that my clients needed. So I studied with the Neuroaffective Relational Model, Lawrence Heller's NARM Training Institute, and took some trauma training there so that I could at least be trauma aware and know when to refer people out.
Yeah, really cool. So maybe let's dive into, as we kind of mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about the everyday practice of breath work and how you can develop a repertoire and have it as like a toolkit. If we talk about that first, and then we can kind of dive into like the more active healing breathwork practice. So tell us, just let's do basics, like basics of breathwork. Why is it important? What can you do in your everyday life? Go from there.
Yeah, sure. So we're looking at breath tools versus breathwork healing. And the breath tools, these are techniques that we use every day to help us reduce stress, boost digestion, improve sleep, balance our mood and our energy. We can even use it to increase our mental focus, even increasing our athletic performance, right? We know that even athletes are using breath tools in their performance abilities. So those look like alternate nostril breathing, Wim Hof, 4-4 breath, 4-8, 4-7-8 to help manage our panic attacks or anxiety. All of these are different tools that we can use. So what I usually recommend is when I'm working with one-on-one with clients is I have a package where I work with them and explain why it works, the science behind it, and then just kind of a little homework. It really takes less than 5 minutes in the morning to practice a breath technique, something like breath of fire that activates our sympathetic nervous system and gets us going in the morning, something to rev us up, right? Can be done even before we get out of bed. I just sit up out of bed, do my breath of fire, less than 5 minutes gets us going. Then something in the afternoon that might look like a balanced breath, something to balance the nervous system, balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Every 120 minutes, we're going back and forth between the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. So what we're looking for is not one is better than the other. We just kind of really want a balanced nervous system as much as we can. And in the afternoon, we can maybe take a dive. So if we're feeling down, we can bring it up. If we're feeling up, we can bring it down. We can kind of meet in the middle. So what you want is a breath technique that equal inhales, equal exhales, and that will balance the nervous system. So even something just as simple as inhaling for 4 and exhaling for 4 all through the nose can kind of balance that nervous system. So I teach people techniques on how to do that. And then in the evening, what we would be looking at is something to move us into the rest period, right? We want our digestive system to work. And so it digests the food we ate for dinner. And we want to be able to move into a rest period. So you're looking for a breath technique that is exhaling. Double the exhale will move us into a rest period. So inhaling for 4 and exhaling for 8 will move the body into that parasympathetic state. So I teach those techniques. And that's 3 simple techniques, less than 5 minutes, less than 15 minutes a day. Very simple.
Yeah. And a great tool to have because you can do, and once you get good at it, you can do it during a meeting. As you're talking, I'm just sitting there being, I'd like to balance my nervous system. I'm going to take some deep inhales and exhale, or just through the nose. And you can do that when you're sitting recording a podcast. You can do it anywhere and it's free, right? Like it's a great resource to have. And I think it's great just for someone to work with a practitioner like yourself because you can help, teach them, guide them so they can learn the tool and then give them homework, as you said, to go, actively use it. Because it tools like that become easier if you've practiced them, right? Like if you practice them, your body's familiar with it, you can be like, oh, I'm going to grab that and I'm going to use that right now. And then it doesn't feel scary or whatever. It's like, oh, that's my breathwork tool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just did the box breath before we started recording.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're absolutely correct. Everything you just said, as long as we have knowledge of how to do that, then it's easier for us to grab that, out of our toolkit. But unless we know how to do it, we're not going to grab it. Right. And it is free, right? I always say it's few people are aware of that we have the power to regulate our bodies, our nervous system, our mood, our digestion, simply by using our breath.
Yeah, it's so cool. I also love that you are teaching your clients that why it works. I've found, like, hands down, the number one thing that I think increases compliance, and compliance is the most important thing. You can have these tools, but if you don't use them, they're not going to get you any better or help you. But I've found that the number one thing that increases compliance is understanding why you're doing some sort of lifestyle practice or change or dietary change or supplement addition. If you don't understand why, you're less likely to choose that tool. So it's so helpful to understand, like, you know, and what you just explained is great. Like when you're doing the inhale breath, you're activating. When you're exhaling, you're calming the system down. If you're doing equal, you're balancing. That's just super great information to have. So you understand, like, hey, when I'm, super jacked up and I'm breathing a lot, you're going to activate your nervous system even more, right? If you're doing like almost like a not forced breath of fire, like you're breathing quickly because you're nervous, like that's going to activate you. So, if you're in a stressful situation, you want to be doing more, correct me if I'm wrong, you want to be doing more longer exhales, right?
Yes, because, well, that's a good segue too. Why does breathing help so much, right? And you're absolutely correct, because those deep breaths stimulate that vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is largely responsible for that parasympathetic response, also known as the rest and digest part of the nervous system. So the vagus nerve controls the heart, the lungs, the digestive tract, and it runs through an opening in the diaphragm. So breathing, singing, those deep breathing, singing, humming, chanting even, all promotes vagal tone and enables that body to self-soothe.
Which is
that's a very simplistic.
Yes, yeah. But that's okay. And if you want to learn more, obviously go take one of Trish's courses. She can explain more, or you can read about it online. But I think the simple explanation, just so your brain can grasp, oh, that's why this is good for me. That's why I should do this. Because I think brains are much more likely to, direct you to that tool. If it's like, oh yeah, I know why this is working. This is going to work well. Let's grab that. Let's grab that out of the toolbox. Let's use this today. We're feeling well activated. Let's go do some nice, and humming and singing are also great and can go with the breath work, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's so interesting. So I never really understood my affinity for humming in church, right? Or choir, why I like the choir so much. Maybe not the lectures, from the pulpit, but why that felt so good. Right. And now I understand why.
Yeah. And singing, I think singing is a great, like singing in the car. I sometimes forget this, and I'll be like in a bad mood and I put on music and I start singing along. I'm like, oh, I feel so much better. But I think it's because I'm singing, right? Like it's, regulating things a little bit. It's do good things for that vagus nerve. So yeah, so many great tools available, right? With the breath work. And you just mentioned a few of them. How many breathwork techniques are there?
There are a lot of breathwork techniques and tools. So, I just named a few. Breath of fire is only one to activate the sympathetic nervous system. You've got bellows breath. there's just
a lot of
Strika. The box breath is something, of course, that the Navy SEALs are known for doing, to help not just regulate the nervous system, but also calms the nervous system, but also gets us to focus. So that's a really great technique to use right before we enter the podcast, right before you do a presentation for work. And if you're breathing in and out through your nose, no one's going to notice.
Yeah, which is why, again, it's such a great tool. You could use it something like that in the heat of the moment. If you're having an argument with someone, you can be like, okay, I'm just going to push pause. I'm going to do a little breathwork technique, and then I'm going to approach my response. So it can be used in all kinds of situations, which is, I think it's amazing. I think it's a great tool. So, okay. So we kind of touched on, the using breathwork kind of in your everyday life as a tool. Let's talk a little bit more about using it for deeper healing and kind of some of the work that you do with the active breathwork.
Yeah, this is, I love this so much, because this is what broke me wide open, and what really changed the trajectory of my life. I wouldn't be here at this podcast if it wasn't for breathwork. I found my voice. I healed deep traumatic wounds. Breath healing is what I call breath healing, active breath work. It is things like holoanthropic breath work, transformational breath work, rebirthing. These are all different styles of this active breath healing. And I say healing very loosely. I mean, we are our own healers. So I use that word loosely. But those are different types of this type of breath work. It's a more holistic approach to breath work. It focuses on using the breath to help move through emotional wounds, promote spiritual growth. It's like a gentle embrace for the soul. It's an active and efficient and effective technique that allows you to disconnect from the thinking mind and enter a different state of consciousness so that we can really open ourselves up to to clarity, connection, maybe love even. And when I say love, I'm really talking about self-love more than anything. But it offers us this ability to restore what's been like wounded or inactive within us. But it can be a big release. I say can be because we all have a different experience with active breath work. Some of us will feel lots of release. Some of us will feel a big space opening up. So
lots of different things that can happen.
Lots of different things, emotional, mental blocks, constriction, tension, trauma, fear, grief, anger can all be released with active breath work. And yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to, I feel like I've obviously have done breath work with you and I've done other experiences there. And to me, some experiences have felt very similar to a psychedelic type experience, right? Like to a psilocybin experience or an ayahuasca type thing. And what do you know, like the nitty gritty of what's happening when you're doing that, like neurotransmitter wise, what's happening in the brain? It's gotta be, is it opening up the pineal gland? I should know this, but I was hoping you could speak a little bit to this.
Yeah. So what happens is we are bringing in much more oxygen than we are releasing CO2. So when that happens, it's affecting that frontal lobe, you're right. It does affect that.
The pineal gland, yeah, which is oftentimes what can get kind of opened up a little bit when you're doing some sort of psychedelic or mind altering, substance. And that, the pineal gland has been linked to like intuition. And, I think a lot of us, our pineal glands get a little hardened and, some of the other things it's used to like open that up. And you can do that through breath work and meditation. I couldn't remember like how exactly, and maybe it is the oxygen piece that you're talking about. So we're increasing oxygen and that's having an effect on those cells.
Yeah. So what is happening is because we are opening that up. I mean, in some ways we are oxygenizing our hypothalamus gland, so that kind of is opening that up as well, making a lot more space. When we release the things that don't serve us anymore, then that opens us up to receive. Right? We have a lot more space to receive at that point, because we're not cluttered. What I like to say is we're not cluttered with, or we're not like our closet's not cluttered, right? We can't fit any more clothes into a closet that's over full. We're kind of decluttering it. But we're weeding a garden, right? If the garden has a lot of weeds in it, then we can't grow anything more. There's no more space for anything new to come in.
And new, that could be new ideas, but that could also be love, higher power, like coming in and like taking care of you, right? I think sometimes our brains are so busy, and if you're listening and you have a belief in higher power, that like you have to let that come in, right? If there's no space, as you mentioned, if there's no space for any more clothes in that closet, how is that love going to come in?
Right. Or even that intuition, like you were saying, how can we are not going to be open to receive or listen to those messages that we're receiving if there's not any space there for it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really like creating a space.
You are creating a space. You are creating a space for that to come in. Absolutely.
And then, so talk about kind of like, you have someone who's coming to work with you. What usually are they working through physical things, mental, emotional things when they're coming to, to use breathwork as a healing tool? What's the typical thing that you see?
Mostly it's going to be emotional. There are some physical, but the physical tends to come from something that they're holding emotionally, right? And then it shows up physically in our bodies, as Dr. Bessel van der Kolk likes to say.
Yeah.
Right? So it's typically when we get to the root of it, it might be showing up in a work relationship or even in a family relationship. But when we get to the root of it, it's usually or something that they're stuck. I hear a lot, I'm stuck. I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Like I can't get past this point. I don't know what my next step is. I feel kind of in a rut. And then when we get to the root of it, it seems what I have found is that, well, there's an old story. There's a misbelief that's rooted in something we've been told. And
so the healing is like working to unwire, like to rewire the brain in that story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and then talk about what does it look like? Like, is it one session? Is it several times? Like, what is working through something? I mean, it's probably different for everyone, but just to let people know, like, what does it look like to be doing this kind of work?
Yeah. So I would say that I find it could be one session and you could feel like you've worked through it all. What I found the most benefit comes from multiple sessions.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you're going to be working with me forever. Yeah. I just find that maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 sessions, you've worked through it. And then maybe you're on like maintenance kind of afterwards. And maybe you have one-on-one sessions. Maybe you do a package with me and you're working through like 3, 4, maybe 5 sessions, one-on-one. We've gotten to a point where you feel like you've moved through that story, and you're on the other side of it. And then maybe you're doing circles at that point in group gatherings.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Because you also lead group gatherings. Talk a little bit about that experience. If someone wants to come and like, is that a good thing for someone to come? Like if they're like, oh, I want to dip my foot into this, I'm not quite sure. Would you say that a group experience would be a good place to start?
It depends on if you're a group person or not. There's some people that's not where they feel comfortable. So a lot of people, that is where they start. And I would say if you are comfortable and you know what you're getting into, then the group is a good thing to be in. I love groups. I love one-on-ones, but I love groups for the camaraderie, the sharing, the vulnerability. When we share in groups, you're usually there's more than one person that might have the same thing that you're going through. And I just feel like there's just so much healing in community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, also, I think when you gather people together and everyone's sharing, you kind of create this like energy field, right? There's like a field and like that is medicine in itself. Like the breathwork is obviously doing all the things it's doing, but as you said, there's healing in community. But when you come together and you like co-create this space, a healing space, that has like, I feel like that amplifies whatever you're doing.
Oh, so powerful.
Yeah. Really powerful.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
Extremely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what's your favorite thing about the work you do?
My favorite thing is watching how the healing kind of ripples outward, and how it's just those aha moments that people have, and watching their lives transform.
Look out, seeing when you've helped them on their healing journey, seeing how they're going to then go and spread their magic in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I've been so lucky. I mean, I have several clients now that I've been working with for years, and they are now either breathwork facilitators themselves or Reiki Master Teachers, or not Master Teacher, but Reiki practitioners, and just watching the transformation.
Yeah.
It's just a blessing.
Well, and I love that you call that the ripple effect. Is like you've helped, several people, and then they're going to go help people. So you're like exponentially healing people at this point, right? Like when you heal someone and then they're able to, use their gift to heal others. Really cool. So let's touch a little bit on the Reiki practices and how you've incorporated that into the breath work and what you've seen like from that.
Yeah. So I want to be clear, like in the beginning, I think it's really important when you're learning a new modality, keeping them very separate is important until you understand, and you understand that particular modality and all of the things it can do. And then, so I kept them very separate. And then I started to realize, okay, this is how I can incorporate Reiki into my breathwork practice. And so now I feel very comfortable knowing both practices, how to bring them in together. And that's where I've been incorporating Reiki. I bring Reiki into my breathwork practice. I use it in grounding. I use it to clear the space at the beginning before anybody comes into the space. And then I do ground everybody at the end of all of my circles and all of my sessions. But yeah, my Reiki practice too has evolved and teaching others now. So that's where that has evolved.
Cool.
Yeah. And I do have packages where I do breath work, and then I end with Reiki. So it might be a shorter breath work and a longer integration period, and balancing the chakras and doing the Reiki. So it's a little bit longer integration.
Yeah. Let's touch on that word integration a little bit, because I think that's such an important part of really any healing modality that you're doing, but particularly, when you're letting go of so many things, if trauma or anything, surfaces, it's really important to be able to come out of that experience and know. So maybe can you talk a little bit about integration?
Yeah. So whether it's circles or one-on-ones, obviously with one-on-ones, there's more time to integrate and give people the one-on-one time they need to offer the integration. But I do usually make sure that regardless of that the active breathwork time that we're doing, that the integration, the rest and the reintegration is equitable to how much time they're doing the active breath work. I do make sure that people understand what their aftercare instructions are, making sure that they ground, that they drink plenty of water. I'm very particular about what I go over.
Yeah.
And giving them time to write down the things that came up. I really I'm a firm believer that getting things out of our head and onto paper is very important for integration, even if it's just writing words, free writing, right? That time is very important. If it's in a circle, I offer people afterwards. I follow up via email and give people an opportunity to book a call with me and have 15-minute calls for any type of integration. The integration after something like breath work can be a couple of days. It could be a week. The things can still come up as long as long as I'm available, right? I'm available to the clients to offer any type of an ear, basically.
Yeah.
What can I help you with?
Yeah.
Right. What are you going through?
Yeah. And I think that's so important. I think it's nice to, an experience like that. If you've never experienced before, it might feel, as you mentioned, or when you first told us your story, like you felt like cracked open, right? And like sometimes that can feel a bit scary after you leave something. Like, wait, I feel really open and vulnerable and all this stuff. And so it's nice to know that there is like some support and with like integrating that experience into your everyday life. So I think really, and if you're listening and you're like wanting to, try this out, like if you're local, obviously I'm going to talk about how you can work with Trish. If you're not local, maybe you can share resources on how to find someone. But I think it's really important to find someone that is going to do that for you. And do you work with people virtually?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, great. So then you don't have to be local. You can just call Trish and she's the perfect person. But yeah, I think it's really important. I talk a lot about that on the show, like making sure you're finding, the right provider or practitioner, healer to walk you through whatever you're going through. And, particularly with something like breathwork, as we talked about, that piece I think is really important. So let's talk about where people can find you and how they can work with you.
Sure. Yep. They can work with me one-on-one, virtually or in person. In person, I am doing my studios in Lothian, Maryland, and I also do circles in Lothian at Honey's Harvest Farm once a month, and I am in Annapolis at Annapolis Crystals once a month. Those are breathwork healing, active breathwork healing circles. I also, I do the breathwork lifestyle, the breathwork for healthy lifestyles. I do workshops on a corporate level for corporate wellness. Yeah, I do those. So I'm available for that as well. You can find me at trishbrewer.com and on Instagram at Trish Brewer Breathwork. And
awesome.
On Facebook.
Yeah. And we'll put all those links in the show notes. But I think this is a great resource and, for either everyday, toolbox stuff, or if you're really wanting to, get cracked wide open or, kind of see what's going on and what you can do healing wise. It's an amazing tool. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and for doing the work you're doing. It's really important.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
Thanks for having me.
Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And thank you guys for listening, and we'll see everyone next week.
Thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to connect with me on social media and leave a rating and/or a review. This helps grow the show so more people have access to this knowledge that leads to empowered healing. Love and light, and see you next week.